Before we get started, anyone want to drive cross country with the God of Thieves? Hi, welcome back. Today is not going to be a reading with Lily or a behind the pages, although I'll probably put this on the behind the pages playlist on YouTube. But today is a release day. That's right. The Salt Black Tree by yours truly is now out in the world. And I am very, very nervous. Release days are always high stress for me. You would think after however many I've done, 50, 75, who knows, who's even keeping track by now? You would think, the chat says I got mine. Hello, yes. Oh, slow down, savor it. Yes, and thank you very much for buying it, and I hope you like it. So, release days are always high stress for me. You would think that it would be ho-hum, old hat by now. It's not. It never is. It's always nerve-wracking. But today's release day has been. I've had lovely. I've had lovely emails from my publisher, lovely emails from my publicist, from my agent. I have had a whole lot of social media love, so thank you very much, all of you. Couldn't ask for better fans, couldn't ask for better readers. So, the two books, it is a duology, Springs Arcana and the Salt Black Tree. This is a complete series. I know there are a lot of people who don't want to buy the first book until the series is complete because they've been hurt by publishing too many times before, and I don't blame you. But now the series is complete, and today I'm going to be reading from the Salt Black Tree. So, and normally on Tuesdays, I say we just started doing it. I just do 15 minutes of question and answer, but since today it's my own book and it's the book's birthday, I thought we'd change it up and do a little bit different. So, just you can tell I'm really nervous and really excited. I don't know what I'm doing. So, The Dead God's Heart came from a very deep place. I always knew I was going to write this story. I just didn't know when. And finally I got a chance to, and now it's out in the world, which is so odd to see. So odd. It's publishing is so much about delayed gratification that when the gratification already arrives, it's like, where's this coming from? So, Salt Black Tree is the second book. It opens right when the first book stops after Nat has returned from the cherry tree in the desert. And if you're thinking of Katie Tunstall's Black Horse and Cherry Tree, you're absolutely right. That is what I was listening to repetitively over and over again while I wrote that entire sequence of Nat's ride and the shootout basically with Ranger and Dima against those who eat the mouthless things. Yeah, I wish you guys could see what it's like in my head because it's just such a movie inside my head, especially when I'm listening to that song. It cuts back and forth between, visions of Nat riding and then Ranger and Dima fighting in their particular ways. But that's all the first book. Today we're talking about the second. So what I'd like to read to you today is near the end of the book where Nat has arrived in New Orleans and she has arrived at the Elysium, the hotel there. And if you're thinking that the Elysium and its concierge, its front desk man is a nod to John Wick, you are absolutely correct. Dima Cognet's is also a little nod to John Wick there. I think the two of them would have a lot to talk about. But Nat has arrived at this hotel. She's put her stuff down, and what happens next is actually a little love song. There's a short story that I read when I was very young in an anthology of, it was actually an Alfred Hitchcock anthology, Monster Museum, and it was Stephen Vincent Benet's wonderful King of the Cats story. And this story has lived in my head rent-free. It's a foundational piece of me as a writer. And of course, I couldn't let a duology full of gods and literature and all these other things, I couldn't let it go by without alluding to it one more. So I would like to read to you the corresponding, the place in the salt black tree that it gave rise to. So, okay. I'm so excited. Ice water today. I'm not allowed any more caffeine for a few hours, or at least that's what the kids say. So, Salt Black Tree by yours truly. Nat closed her eyes. It was beautiful, luxurious, perfect, but she wanted to be driving. No, that wasn't quite right. Nat Drozdova wanted to be home. The little yellow house on South Aurora was almost always full of suffocating tension, but without that weight she was depressurized, a fish gasping on a stony shore. She wanted her small bedroom, her closet that had never held as much as the suitcases now open and spilling their bounty across satin, damask, and fat, self-satisfied pillows. She wanted the kitchen, with the ancient white Frigidaire and the old Bakelite radio. She wanted the parlor's stillness and the houseplants in every room, even the postage stamp foyer. She wanted to go out the back door, down the porch steps, and take the hard right turn to the tiny garage, where the Léon Bollier crouched and Leo's woodworking tools were hung neatly on pegs, sawdust and gasoline grease smells mixing together to spell safety. She wanted the flagstone path in the front yard, the white picket fence, and the hum of the most insomniac city on earth, audible the instant one stepped outside any refuge. Most of all, she wanted to stand in the middle of the master bedroom, breathing in Maria's perfume. Sometimes, when she was in a good mood, Mom held Nat close, stroking her hair and humming. "My little dumpling, you will do something nice for Mama now, She still loved her mother. Even now, even knowing what she knew. The painful, unwilling child's affection was a dry weight in her throat, jostled by the rattling of George's gift lurking somewhere far deeper. If you didn't accept a present, what the hell did you do with it? Who did it belong to? "I want to live," she heard herself whisper in the deep hush of an Elysium suite. Did that make her just as selfish as Maria? The sisters at school talked about sacrifice and service, and so did Georgia in her spare, serene desert. But if there were 50 different Christs nailed to 50 different crosses, what was all the agony for? What was the point? The big window in the suite's bedroom was a French door. A small balcony with curly-cued wrought iron railings looked over a curiously empty, fog-bound street. As soon as Nat stepped outside, the humidity wrapped around her velvety thick, almost impossible to breathe through. The Elysium's air conditioning was tip-top, at least. The mist smelled of salt, silt, fish, frying oil, and red mud. Streetlights, like old gas lamps, sputtered, uncertain in the fitful daylight. Some had multicolored Christmas lights wrapped around them. How many days had Nat lost? Dmitri hadn't said the exact date, just past Christmas. The subtle inner sense Nat was beginning to rely on more than unconsciously told her Mom was still alive, but here she was in the Big Easy, and she wasn't Let's take that line again. Here she was in the Big Easy, and she wasn't dipping beignet in chocolate. Oh, God. Take 2. Take 3 now. Let's try that line again, Here she was in the Big Easy, and she wasn't dipping beignet in hickory coffee, listening to jazz, or ambling among crowds of tourists. She was stuck in a plush, gilded prison cell, waiting for dark to fall, and another agonizing, horrifying test. A sound pierced the fog, long mellow notes, observing a stately pace. Nat cocked her head, listening intently. Music. Shadows moved at street level. She recognized what the musicians were playing and winced just as the soupy white vapor began to thin. It was a funeral march, familiar from childhood cartoons on the bulky old rabbit-eared television in the parlor. Pray for the dead, and the dead will pray for thee. The shadows moved in stately lines, but they were small and definitely not human. Nat's heart pounded. Her hands curled around the end of the iron banister, refusing to let go. The funny crawling sensation on her scalp was each hair attempting to stand straight up, and it prickled down her back, down her arms, spilled riverine down her legs, and made her breathing short and silent. I cannot fucking believe this, she thought. But there it was, right in front of her. Cats. Tabbies, tuxedos, Siamese, Persians, calicos, short hairs, long hairs, even hairless sphinxes, every shade and every size, Maine Coons to ragdolls to teacup kittens marching several abreast down cracked pavement, parting in scabrous patches to show old bricks and the occasional cobble. People rarely tore up a road and replaced it. They just laid another coat of paving down and called it good. Children, even divinities, wore a fresh layer over the older path, Nat thought, and watched the cortege move, slink-stepping with regal patience. A small, gloss-polished open hearse was preceded by 13 black cats, not in harness, but simply walking in unison, their tails high as ostrich feathers. An invisible force drew the carriage along, its wheels making a slight grinding sound, and it was that tiny noise that convinced Nat she wasn't having some sort of psychotic divinity breakdown. She was saying, damn it, the madness was in the world itself. The glossy black coffin bore a tiny gilt crown, winking slyly as the fog thinned still more. It passed her balcony, none of the cats deigning to look up, and in its wake came even more felines, padfoot quiet, their shoulders moving with the supple swimming grace of predators. By the time the procession began to straggle, sunshine was peeling off even more fog, and it was tepid warm for the end of December. New York was probably still snowed under, though without a fresh application of white, all the ice would be dingy now. The final flicking tail of the cat crowd disappeared into lifting mist. The funeral march vanished with a long, last, mournful note. And Nat realized, with a painful internal thump, what she'd just seen. It was an old short story, one always sending a chill through her. Le rat est mort, she murmured. Then I, one of the dinner guests, or Puss, sleeping by the fire, would shout, am king of the cats. He'd vanish up the chimney with a bang, never to be seen again. It didn't have to be an omen if it was just literature, right? After Jay's party, she shouldn't have been surprised. But she was. All the unreality of the last few days crowded her, poking and prodding. She managed to peel her fingers from the balustrade, took a few staggering steps inside, followed by the returning hum of mortal traffic, and closed the glass door. Nat stood for a few moments, scrubbing at her face, her palms solid as Georgia's, the rest of her brimming with deep, ineffable warmth. Why a cat funeral straight from folklore should be the straw breaking the camel's back, she had no idea, but it was a long while before she could drop her hands and return to the bed and its cargo of bright gifts. She closed the Arcana box, nestling it back in its home, and set about replacing everything else. Marisol expected Nat to survive, no matter what else happened. It was, at least and at last, a real vote of confidence. That was how she was going to take it, anyway. Still, she spent the afternoon refolding and repacking, closing each suitcase with a slight, definite thump. It would be nice to dress up, to play the part, to pretend, But if Nat Drozdova was going to be roped into a country-crossing scavenger hunt, shoved from one square to the next in a rigged chessboard, and terrified out of her mind by mouthless cheesecloth-veiled shadows, gangster gods, rattlers, coyotes, and old folklore, she was going to do it on her own terms. And in her own damn clothes. So there you have it, a little bit from the Salt Black Tree. That's one of my favorite scenes, and it does have a hidden hook in it. I talk a lot about hidden hooks, the things that are behind a story that the writer knows have to be there in order to make the rest of the story hang right. And the hidden hook in this isn't actually the allusion to that old short story that happens to hold a particular place in my heart. The hidden hook in this is Nat's determination to meet her doom wearing her own clothes. She's no longer dressing up as anything else or even wanting to be anything else. For Nat as a character, this tiny little piece of the book is very important because she is determined to do things on her own terms now, which is a step forward for anyone, a young woman coming into adulthood, any teenager coming into adulthood, a child, a young adult shaking off a past that might have been a little less than ideal, an upbringing a little less than ideal, learning to be determined about doing things on your own terms is one of the things that this entire duology is about. And I hope, if you read it, that you enjoy it. So, a little bit from the Salt Black Tree. This will go up on YouTube as soon as I'm finished filming here on Twitch. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming along. And now I'm going to go stick my head in a bucket, either full of ice water or not, and hyperventilate, because that is the joke that I like to make on release days. It's only partly a joke. So I'm very nervous, but I'm also very glad that these books are out in the world, meeting readers, and hopefully meeting the readers that they can help, that they belong to. So, and I'm tearing up. So this is a good time for me to say ta-ta. Remember to wash your hands, wear your masks, take a deep breath, be kind to yourselves and to each other. And with that, I will bid you a very fond adieu. And Chat says, take care of yourself. I will do my best. And you too. Thank you. Ta-ta.